Ethan Miller hoisted his old backpack higher on his shoulder as he climbed the crumbling steps to the small apartment he shared with his mom and younger brother. The day had dragged on, and between his heavy textbooks and the weight of everything going on at home, he felt drained. It had been over a year since his dad passed away unexpectedly, but the grief still lingered in their lives like a shadow. The familiar smell of dinner greeted him as he stepped inside. It wasn't much, just rice and some canned veggies his mom had thrown together, but it was warm, and it was theirs. He forced a smile as he closed the door behind him, greeted by his little brother Elijah's voice from the kitchen. "Hey, Ethan, you're late again," Elijah said, barely looking up from the homework spread across the small table. "Didn't you say your shift ended earlier today?" "I got held up," Ethan replied, dropping his bag to the floor. "How's it going, Eli? You done with that math?" "Almost. It's easy stuff," Elijah said proudly. Their mom, Deborah, stepped out from the tiny kitchen, moving slower than usual. Ethan instantly noticed the paleness in her face and the subtle tremble in her hands. He frowned and walked toward her. "You okay, Ma?" "I'm fine, baby," she said, brushing him off with a tired smile. "Just a bit worn out. Don't worry about me." He didn't push it, but his chest tightened. Deborah had been living with diabetes for years, and ever since his dad's death, her health had been slipping. The cost of her treatment was more than they could ever afford. No matter how many hours Ethan worked, the bills kept piling up: rent, meds, doctor visits. Still, Deborah always tried to put on a brave face. They sat down for dinner together, the small kitchen filled with the clinking of forks and Elijah rambling about his day at school. Ethan tried to stay present, nodding and chiming in when he could, but his mind kept drifting back to the stack of overdue bills on the counter. Later that night, after Elijah had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone at the table, staring at those same bills. His job at the local diner barely covered groceries, let alone the rent or his mom's prescriptions. On top of everything, he was drowning in coursework from law school, where he already felt like an outsider. Being one of the only black students in the program came with its own set of struggles: awkward stares, offhand comments, and that unspoken vibe that he didn't really belong. But Ethan wasn't about to give up. He had dreams, big ones, of becoming a lawyer and fighting for families like his who got overlooked or ignored. Still, nights like this made him wonder if he could really keep going. He thought about his dad, David, who had worked himself to the bone as a truck driver to give them a decent life. Losing him had left a hole in their world, not just emotionally, but financially. David had been the glue holding everything together. And now, without him, everything felt like it was falling apart. Ethan let out a heavy sigh and ran a hand over his buzzed hair. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Jordan, one of his co-workers at the diner. "Yo, you coming to that fundraiser I mentioned? It's this Saturday. Free food, drinks, good for networking." Ethan rolled his eyes. Networking wasn't exactly on his to-do list right now, and Jordan had been bugging him about this event for weeks. He replied quickly, "Not sure, man. Got a lot going on." Jordan responded right away. "You should come. Seriously. The people there, big names, could open some doors." Ethan didn't answer. The idea of showing up to some fancy party filled with rich folks felt ridiculous. What would he even say to them? What did he have to offer? And yet, something about it tugged at him. Maybe, just maybe, it could be a shot at something better. The next day flew by in a haze of lectures and a back-to-back shift. He barely gave the fundraiser another thought until Elijah brought it up at dinner. "You should go, Ethan," Elijah said, eyes wide. "You're always talking about how you need connections if you want to make it as a lawyer. This could be your shot." Ethan poked at his food, shaking his head. I don't even have anything decent to wear." "I can help with that," Deborah said gently. There was something firm in her voice, something he hadn't heard in a while. "You've done everything for this family. If there's even a small chance that this event could help you, then you have to go." Ethan glanced at his mom, her fragile frame a constant reminder of why he was pushing himself so hard. He gave a small nod, a mix of doubt and determination in his chest. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll go." That night, he borrowed a suit from their neighbor, an old salesman who had long since retired. The jacket was a bit too big in the chest, and the pants didn't quite reach his ankles, but Ethan didn't care. Pride wasn't something he could afford right now. As Saturday drew closer, he felt a gnawing unease. He didn't know what to expect at the fundraiser, but deep down he hoped, maybe even prayed, it would lead to something that could help pull his family out of the hole they were stuck in. When the evening finally came, Ethan stood outside the massive estate where the event was happening. The tall iron gates looked like something out of a movie, completely foreign compared to the cracked sidewalks and broken streetlights back in his neighborhood. Beyond the gates stretched a manicured lawn that led up to a huge mansion glowing in warm light. Luxury cars circled the driveway, spotless and shining in the golden hour sun. Ethan tugged at the sleeves of the borrowed suit, which somehow felt both too tight and too loose all at once. He took a deep breath and walked through the open gate. A valet stepped toward him, offering to take his worn-out leather bag, but Ethan politely declined. It was the only thing he had on him that felt like his, and he wasn't ready to let it go. Inside, the mansion was dripping with wealth. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, lighting up the glossy marble floors. The air was filled with soft music, quiet laughter, and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. Ethan froze for a second in the doorway, feeling out of place. He tugged at his tie, trying to loosen the anxiety coiling in his stomach. He scanned the crowd, hoping to spot Jordan, the co-worker who had talked him into coming, but instead his eyes landed on a well-dressed group near the bar, laughing loudly. He caught bits of their conversation, investments, politics, trips to Europe, and it only made him feel more out of place. He was about to turn around and leave when a voice spoke next to him. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." Startled, Ethan turned to see an older woman standing nearby. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and she wore a navy dress that shimmered softly under the lights. She leaned slightly on an elegant cane and held a champagne glass with the kind of poise that said she belonged here, but her face was warm, her tone inviting. Ethan stumbled. "Yeah, it's a bit much." She laughed gently. "That's one way to put it. Overwhelming is another. I'm Evelyn Walker." Ethan shook her hand after a moment. "Ethan Miller." "Nice to meet you, Ethan." She looked at him closely, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "You're not a regular at these kinds of events, are you?" "No, ma'am," he admitted, feeling a little self-conscious. "A co-worker invited me, said it'd be good for networking." "Smart co-worker," she said, smiling. "Networking is the name of the game at events like this, but it's easy to feel like a fish out of water." "Yeah," Ethan said, glancing around again. "I'm starting to realize that." Evelyn motioned toward a quieter corner of the room. "Come sit with me. You look like you could use a break." He followed her to a pair of chairs near a tall window. The buzz of the party faded as they sat down, and Ethan felt a bit of the pressure lift. Still, he wondered why someone like her would take the time to talk to someone like him. "So, Ethan," Evelyn said, setting her glass on the small table between them, "what really brought you here?" "Networking's a good reason, but I get the feeling there's more to it." Ethan hesitated. He didn't usually open up to strangers, but there was something disarming about her. She didn't seem like she was judging him, just listening. I'm in law school, he said slowly, trying to give my family a better future. It's been tough. My mom's sick, my little brother's still in school, and after my dad passed, everything just kind of fell apart. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her face softening as he spoke. That's a lot to carry, she said gently. And yet here you are, still pushing forward. That takes strength. Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the compliment. It's not like I have a choice. If I don't do it, no one else will. Evelyn gave a small, knowing smile. That kind of drive is rare, and it's exactly what will carry you through. They kept talking, their conversation flowing naturally in spite of the gap in age and background. For the first time that night, Ethan felt like he wasn't completely alone. Ethan found himself opening up more than he expected, not just about the money problems, but about the racism he dealt with almost every day. He talked about professors who didn't think he belonged, classmates who left him out, and the constant feeling that he had to work twice as hard just to be seen. Evelyn listened closely, nodding with understanding. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong, she said gently. But don't let that stop you. The world needs people like you, people who stand up for what's right, no matter how tough it gets. There was something in her voice that struck Ethan. She wasn't just being nice, she meant every word. For the first time that evening, he felt like someone really saw him. Not as a struggling kid, not as a charity case, but as someone who mattered. As the night went on, Evelyn began to share parts of her own life. She spoke of her late husband, who had been a philanthropist and believed in using his success to help others. After he passed, she had made it her mission to keep that legacy alive by supporting communities that were often overlooked. I've met so many bright, talented people, she said softly, her gaze drifting for a moment. But so many of them never got the chances they deserved. That's why I do what I do, to try and even the odds, even if just a little. Ethan nodded, moved by her words. He hadn't expected to find common ground with someone like her, but something about the way she spoke made it feel like she understood him in a way most people didn't. As the event wound down, Evelyn placed a gentle hand on his arm. Ethan, it's been a real pleasure talking with you, she said. I hope this isn't the last time we meet. I'd like that, Ethan replied, surprised by how much he meant it. Evelyn smiled warmly. Good. Take care of yourself. And remember, you're stronger than you think. As Ethan walked out of the mansion that night, something felt different. Their conversation hadn't just been a passing moment, it had stirred something in him. For the first time in what felt like forever, he had hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to shift. The morning sun streamed through the broken blinds in his apartment, waking Ethan far earlier than he wanted. He groaned and sat up, still feeling the weight of work, school, and the lingering emotions from his conversation with Evelyn Walker. Her words had stuck with him, her calm confidence echoing in his mind. It was rare for anyone to believe in him, especially someone he'd just met. He shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, when his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? Ethan, this is Evelyn Walker, came the familiar, composed voice on the other end. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't really expected to hear from her again. Oh, good morning, Mrs. Walker. I didn't think you'd call. She laughed softly. I hope you don't mind. I've been thinking about our talk last night. I really enjoyed it. Are you free to meet today? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Ethan hesitated. His mind raced with questions. Why would someone like her want to see him again? Yeah, I can be free. Where should I go? My place, she said with a warm but clear tone. I'll send my driver to pick you up. Does 2 o'clock work? Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. See you then, Ethan. She hung up before he could ask anything else. Ethan stared at the screen, anxiety knotting in his gut. What could she possibly want? Right at 2, a sleek black car pulled up in front of his building. A driver in a suit stepped out, opened the door for him, and Ethan slid into the back seat. The ride was smooth, far removed from the crowded buses he was used to, and it only made him feel more out of place. When they reached Evelyn's estate, Ethan felt that familiar wave of intimidation hit him again. The towering gates, the endless lawn. It was just as impressive as he remembered, but this time it also made him nervous. The driver led him to the front door, where a butler welcomed him in and guided him through the house. Evelyn was waiting in a bright, sunlit sitting room, seated comfortably in an elegant armchair. A tray of tea and tiny pastries sat neatly on the table between them. She looked up and smiled warmly as Ethan stepped inside. "Ethan, I'm so glad you could come," she said, motioning to the chair across from her. "Thanks for having me," Ethan replied, sitting down cautiously. They chatted for a few minutes, exchanging small talk. Evelyn asked how his mom was doing, how school was going, and how he was holding up. Her questions weren't surface level. She really wanted to know. But even as they talked, Ethan could tell there was something else on her mind, something important. Evelyn finally set her teacup down, folding her hands in her lap. The warm, casual tone she'd kept up until now shifted into something more serious. "Ethan, there's something personal I want to share with you. I think you'll understand why once you hear it." Ethan leaned in, curious. She took a breath and started, her voice soft and thoughtful. "I haven't always been the person you see now. A long time ago, I was completely caught up in status and wealth. I didn't really see the struggles of others, didn't even think to look. But everything changed the night a young black man saved my life." Ethan blinked, surprised. "Saved your life?" She nodded. "I was walking home late when a man tried to mug me. He had a knife, and I completely froze. Out of nowhere, this young man stepped in and stopped the attack. He stayed with me until help came. I never even got his name, but what he did, it changed me. It opened my eyes to the reality of inequality, to the things I'd been blind to all my life." Her gaze drifted off for a second before she continued. "Since that night, I've dedicated myself to using what I have, my money, my influence, to help others, especially those society tends to forget." Ethan sat silently, absorbing every word. "That's incredible," he said, not sure what else to say. Evelyn gave a faint smile. "Thank you. And that's actually why I asked you to come today. Ethan, I see something in you. You remind me of that young man, your strength, your determination, your heart. Those are the kind of qualities the world desperately needs." Ethan felt his face grow warm. "I'm just trying to survive," he said, a little embarrassed. "And yet you're doing it with courage and grace," she said. "That's rare. Which brings me to something I need to ask." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on his. "Ethan, I'm dying." "I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I've been told I have less than a year left." Ethan inhaled sharply. He'd noticed she seemed frail, but hearing it out loud hit different. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. She waved her hand gently. "Don't be. I've had a good life, and I've made peace with it. But before I go, I want to make sure what I've built doesn't go to waste. I need someone to carry it forward, someone I trust, someone like you." Ethan stared at her, not fully understanding. "I don't get it. What exactly are you saying?" "I want you to marry me," she said, calm and direct, like she'd rehearsed it in her mind 100 times. Ethan blinked hard, convinced he'd misheard. "You want me to marry you?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Not in the traditional sense. This wouldn't be about love or appearances. It's a legal partnership. The easiest way to pass everything I have, my foundation, my estate, into your hands." Ethan's thoughts went wild. The idea was unreal. "Mrs. Walker, I don't know if I can do that." "I understand it's a lot to take in," she said gently. "But think about what this could mean for you and for your family. Your mom could get proper treatment. Your brother could go to the best schools. And you? You could use everything I've built to fight for the people who need it most." The weight of her offer settled on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about money. It was about everything he'd ever wanted to fix, but couldn't. "Can I think about it?" he asked, his voice low. "Of course," she replied with a nod. "Take all the time you need. Just remember, Ethan, opportunities like this don't show up often. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most powerful changes." As he left the estate that afternoon, his head spun with 1,000 thoughts. He'd only come to see her out of curiosity, but now he was standing at a crossroads that could change his entire future. The days that followed blurred together. Ethan went to work, sat through classes, and had dinner with his family, all while Evelyn's words played on repeat in his mind. Sometimes, the hardest choices. Each night, he lay awake staring at the peeling ceiling in his bedroom, trying to make sense of it all. The idea of marrying someone 50 years older felt unreal, like something out of a strange dream. But it was also a lifeline. His mom's medical bills, the rent, his brother's future, it could all be taken care of. He wouldn't have to struggle every single day just to keep them afloat. But what would people say? Would he lose the last bit of pride he had? One evening at dinner, Deborah noticed how quiet he'd been. She reached out and gently placed her hand over his. "You've got something heavy on your heart, baby. Talk to me." Ethan hesitated. He didn't know how to say it without sounding crazy, but after a long breath, he spoke. "I got an offer," he said slowly, not meeting her eyes. "Someone wants me to marry her. She's older, much older, but she says she can help us. Pay for your treatment, get Elijah into a good school, take care of everything." Deborah's brows knit in confusion, but she didn't say a word. She just waited, letting him explain. Ethan went on, telling his mom everything about Evelyn's illness, her foundation, and the unbelievable offer she'd made. By the time he finished, Deborah's face was a blend of shock and sorrow. "Ethan," she said slowly, "that's a lot to take in." "I know," he said, his voice tight. "It just feels wrong, like I'm giving up a part of myself, but I don't know what else to do. We're barely staying afloat." Deborah was quiet for a moment, staring off like she was sorting through her thoughts. Then she looked back at him, her eyes full of love and something stronger. Resolve. "Baby, you've been holding this family together for too long. If this woman truly believes in you and wants to help, maybe it's not about whether it feels right or wrong. Maybe it's about what you can do with the chance she's giving you." Ethan blinked. He hadn't expected that. "You really think I should do it?" "I think," she said, her voice firm despite how tired she looked, "you're a good man, and sometimes good men have to make hard choices to protect the people they love." Her words stayed with him long after she went to bed. That night, Ethan thought about Elijah, who was still full of dreams but old enough to sense how much they were struggling. He thought about his mom, hiding her pain behind brave smiles so he wouldn't worry. And he thought about himself, how he'd been in survival mode for so long he didn't even remember what hope felt like. 2 days later, Ethan stood at Evelyn's front door again, his heart racing as he rang the bell. The same butler let him in and guided him to the sunlit sitting room where Evelyn waited, calm and composed as ever. She gave him a warm smile, though her sharp eyes immediately searched his face for an answer. "Ethan," she said, motioning for him to sit. "I didn't expect to see you back this soon." "I've been thinking," he said as he sat across from her, "about your offer." "And?" she asked, her voice patient but attentive. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands gripping the armrest. "I'll do it. I'll marry you." Evelyn's smile softened, and for just a second, he thought he saw relief in her eyes. "You've made a brave choice, Ethan. I promise you, this won't be something you'll regret." The next few days flew by. Evelyn wasted no time arranging a small private ceremony with only a few people present. Ethan signed all the legal paperwork, feeling like a bystander in his own life. When he tried on his wedding suit, he couldn't bring himself to look in the mirror. He didn't recognize the man staring back. The wedding day came with little fuss. The ceremony was held in a quiet chapel on Evelyn's estate. Only her lawyer, a few trusted staff members, and Ethan's mom and brother were there. Deborah wore her nicest church dress and gave him a soft smile as he walked down the aisle. Elijah looked around wide-eyed, both confused and impressed by everything around him. Evelyn stood at the altar in a tasteful navy dress, her cane resting lightly in one hand. She looked poised and steady. When Ethan stepped beside her, she met his eyes with a calm, knowing look. The ceremony was quick, the officiant speaking in quiet, measured tones. The vows were simple and formal. Ethan stumbled slightly when he said, "I do." But he held Evelyn's gaze and drew strength from how unwavering she was. When it was done, the guests clapped politely. Evelyn placed her hand gently on Ethan's arm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me." After the ceremony, they had a small reception in the estate's dining room. Ethan sat with his mother and Elijah, still trying to wrap his head around everything that had just happened. Evelyn moved gracefully through the room, chatting with the guests as if it were any ordinary afternoon. That evening, she called Ethan into her study. It was a rich, elegant space lined with shelves of old books and anchored by a big oak desk. She gestured for him to sit. "Now that we're officially partners," she began, "there are some things we need to talk about." Ethan nodded, not sure what to expect. "First," she said, "I want you to get familiar with the foundation. It's the core of everything I've spent my life building. I want you to understand what we stand for and how we've helped people. Over the next few weeks, you'll meet the team and visit some of the communities we support." Ethan listened closely. She wasn't treating this like a favor or symbolic gesture. She was preparing him to take real responsibility. "Second," she added, her tone softening, "I want you to feel at home here. This estate, it's yours now too. I know what we're doing is unconventional, but I hope you'll come to see it as a true partnership, not just something you agreed to out of obligation." Ethan didn't know how to respond. Everything still felt surreal, and the weight of his decision was only beginning to sink in. But looking at Evelyn, this strong, sharp, compassionate woman who had trusted him with her legacy, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, a flicker of hope. "I'll give it everything I've got," Ethan said finally, his voice steady and sure. Evelyn smiled gently. "That's all I could ever ask." The night ended quietly, but Ethan found sleep impossible. He lay awake in the unfamiliar comfort of his new room, surrounded by things he'd never imagined for himself. It felt surreal, like he'd stepped into someone else's life. For the first time in years, though, the path ahead didn't feel like a wall. It was uncertain, maybe even scary, but it held the faint glow of possibility. The morning sun poured over Evelyn Walker's estate, casting a golden light across the garden and shimmering off the mansion's massive windows. Inside, Ethan sat at the breakfast table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. 2 days had passed since the wedding, but everything still felt strange, too big, too quiet, too much to take in. Evelyn entered with her usual grace, leaning lightly on her cane. Even with her frailty, she carried herself with a quiet authority that made the room feel like hers the moment she stepped in. "Good morning, Ethan," she said, taking the seat across from him. "Good morning, Evelyn," he corrected quickly. A smile tugged at her lips. "You'll get used to it. How are you settling in?" Ethan hesitated. "It's a lot. This place feels like another planet." She chuckled. "It must, but give it time. You'll find your rhythm. Now eat, Ethan. You'll need your energy. We're heading out soon to visit one of the Foundation's projects." He blinked. "Already? I thought you'd give me a little more time to get up to speed." "There's no better way to learn than jumping in," she said. "Besides, I want you to see for yourself what this work means." By mid-morning, they were in a sleek black car, with Evelyn's assistant, Olivia, in the front seat. As they drove through the city, Evelyn explained that their destination was a community center in a historically black neighborhood, one of the Foundation's earliest and most cherished efforts. "We've supported this center for years," she said. "After-school programs, job training, family support. It's made a real difference." Ethan listened closely, growing more curious by the minute. When they arrived, the energy of the place hit him right away. Kids played basketball outside, laughter echoing through the air. Inside, adults gathered in classrooms for job workshops and parenting classes. The walls were alive with vibrant murals celebrating Black heritage and local heroes. As they walked through the center, Evelyn introduced Ethan to the staff and volunteers. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to see her, and their respect was clear in every handshake and smile. Ethan watched how she softened with the children, her usual formality giving way to warmth and laughter. One of the center's coordinators, a kind woman named Grace, gently pulled Ethan aside. "She's something else, isn't she?" she said, nodding toward Evelyn. "This place wouldn't be here if not for her. She's not just a donor, she shows up, she listens, she cares." Ethan nodded slowly, a strange mix of admiration and pressure building in his chest. The weight of what he'd taken on was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just some symbolic gesture. Evelyn had changed lives, and now she was passing that legacy to him. As the day went on, he watched her speak with parents, encourage teens, and even play a friendly game of chess with one of the older kids. Seeing her in action lit something in him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. If she could give her life to this kind of work, maybe he could too. That evening, back at the estate, Ethan joined Evelyn in her study. A warm, wood-paneled room filled with towering bookshelves and a giant oak desk. It had the feel of a quiet retreat, a place of thought and purpose. She poured 2 cups of tea and handed him one. "You were quiet today," she said. "What did you think of the center?" "It was amazing," Ethan said honestly. "I had no idea how much the Foundation actually does. Seeing it in real life, feeling it, it makes everything more real." Evelyn nodded. "That's exactly why I wanted you there. Reports and budgets can only tell you so much. The real impact? It's in the lives we touch." Her words hung in the air for a moment, heavy but powerful. Ethan took a slow sip of tea, then set the cup down. "Can I ask you something?" he said, finally giving voice to the question that had been burning in his mind. Why me? You could have chosen anyone, someone more experienced, someone who already knows this world. Why did you choose me? She met his eyes, calm but direct. Because you remind me of someone I used to know, someone who didn't accept the world as it is, but believed in what it could be. You have heart, Ethan, and strength. And most importantly, you know the struggle. You've lived it. That kind of understanding can't be taught. Ethan swallowed hard. Her words lifted him up, but they also scared him. What if I mess it up? He asked, barely above a whisper. What if I'm not enough? Evelyn reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. We all stumble, she said, but failing doesn't mean you've lost. It just means you're trying. And I believe in you, Ethan. That's something you don't have to earn. It's all part of the journey. What matters most is that you don't stop. Over the next few days, Ethan joined Evelyn as she visited more of the Foundation's programs. They stopped by a women's shelter where survivors of abuse spoke about rebuilding their lives. They attended a scholarship ceremony filled with hopeful young students, many of whom credited the Foundation for giving them a shot at something better. Each experience opened Ethan's eyes a little more to the depth of the work Evelyn had poured her heart into for decades. But as the week went on, Ethan noticed a shift. Evelyn was slowing down. Her hands shook more, her steps were unsteady, and she leaned harder on Olivia for support. Still, she refused to complain or take it easy. She pushed forward, determined to spend her remaining time making a difference. On the 7th day, she called Ethan into her study. She was at her desk, pale but composed, a neat stack of papers in front of her. Her voice was calm but firm. Ethan, there's something I need you to read. She slid an envelope toward him. His name was written in elegant script across the front. This is for you, she said. It has everything you'll need to understand what's next. Ethan stared at it, the weight of it hitting him even before he touched it. What do you mean? Evelyn gave him a faint smile. You'll see once you read it. Just promise me something. Whatever happens, don't stop. Keep the work going. A lump rose in Ethan's throat as he reached for the envelope. I promise, he said, his voice thick with emotion. That night, Evelyn passed peacefully in her sleep. Ethan sat in his room, the envelope still in his hands, numb with grief. Losing her wasn't just losing someone he'd come to care about. It was losing a guide, a mentor, someone who had believed in him when he barely believed in himself. When he finally opened the envelope, he found a handwritten letter. Her voice echoed in his head as he read it, the words steady and filled with purpose. Ethan, if you're reading this, I've already gone, but my belief in you remains. I didn't choose you lightly. I saw in you the kind of strength this world needs, resilience, compassion, and the courage to stand up against what's wrong. I grew up surrounded by privilege, blind to the struggles of others. That changed the night a stranger stepped in to save me, expecting nothing in return. It opened my eyes to a world I'd never bothered to understand. From then on, I made it my mission to give back, to help those who'd been ignored or pushed aside. But this work doesn't belong to one person. Change happens when we pass the torch to someone else. And now, Ethan, I'm passing it to you. At the bottom of the letter was a small key labeled Office Vault, along with a set of instructions. Later that afternoon, Ethan walked to Evelyn's study. It looked just like it had the last time they'd sat there, sunlight spilling across the polished floor, the scent of old books and warm wood in the air. He found the vault beneath her desk, just like she'd described. He slid the key in, and with a soft click, the door opened. Inside were neatly labeled binders, a pile of sealed envelopes, and a worn leather journal. He picked up the journal first, flipping it open to the first page. Evelyn's handwriting filled the paper, careful, clear, and steady. "This work is bigger than one person," she had written. "It's about giving people chances they've long been denied. It's about breaking cycles of poverty and injustice that keep families trapped for generations. If you're reading this, Ethan, that means it's your turn now. And I believe with everything in me that you're ready." Ethan closed his eyes, the journal pressed against his chest. The grief was still raw, but underneath it, something new stirred. Purpose. She was gone, but she'd left him everything he needed. And now it was up to him to carry it forward. The journal was filled with Evelyn's notes, everything from the early growing pains of the foundation to its proudest moments. She had documented it all with incredible detail, offering a window into her choices, her challenges, and the passion that fueled her every move. As Ethan flipped through the pages, her voice seemed to echo in his mind, and with each entry, the weight of what she'd passed on to him became clearer. Under the journal was a thick folder marked "Immediate Actions." Inside were step-by-step plans for ongoing projects, budgets, key contacts, timelines, everything. There were even personal handwritten notes addressed to specific team members, each one thoughtful and specific to their roles. As Ethan took it all in, something inside him shifted. Evelyn hadn't picked him to be a stand-in. She'd trusted him to lead, to continue what she'd started. And he wasn't going to let her down. The next morning, Ethan called a meeting with the Foundation's senior staff. They gathered in the estate's conference room, some looking curious, others skeptical. Most of them had only met him briefly, and he could feel the uncertainty in the air. He opened the meeting by reading Evelyn's letter out loud. Her words filled the room, quieting the whispers of doubt. "She believed in all of us," Ethan said when he finished, his voice calm but resolute. "And I plan to honor that belief by making sure this foundation not only survives, but grows." He went on to lay out the plans Evelyn had left behind and shared his own promise to lead with honesty, humility, and a willingness to learn. He admitted he wasn't an expert, but he was committed. By the end of the meeting, something had shifted. There was still hesitation in the room, but there was also something new: hope. In the weeks that followed, Ethan threw himself into the work. He met one-on-one with each department head, learning what they did and what challenges they faced. He visited program sites, talked to families and students, and listened to their stories. The deeper he got, the more he realized just how much of an impact the foundation had made, and how much more there was to do. But not everyone was convinced. Some staff members quietly questioned whether he was ready. Others, especially outside donors and partners, were more direct. At one tense meeting, a well-known donor didn't hold back. "Mr. Miller," they said, their tone clipped, "do you really believe you're equipped to lead this? Evelyn was a visionary. Her shoes aren't easy to fill." Ethan felt his chest tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "I get it," he said, looking the donor in the eye. "I know I'm not Evelyn, and I won't pretend to be. No one can replace her. But I'm here because she believed I could carry this work forward, and I will. This isn't about me. It's about the people this foundation was built to serve. If you give me a chance, I'll show you I'm ready." The room went quiet. The donor didn't smile, but after a pause, they gave a small nod. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. That night, Ethan went back to Evelyn's study. He pulled out her journal again and reread one of her entries about facing doubt and fear. She had known what it meant to struggle, to be questioned, to stand alone, and still she had pushed forward. Looking around the study, Ethan noticed a framed photo tucked among the books. It was Evelyn in her younger years, smiling brightly, standing with a group of school children. Her joy was unmistakable, her purpose shining through. He picked up the photo, staring at it for a moment. "I won't let you down," he whispered. "I swear." Early the next morning, Ethan stood out on the balcony, looking over the gardens bathed in soft light. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of blooming flowers. For a few quiet moments, he let himself breathe, soaking in the stillness before the chaos of the day. But the quiet didn't last. The pressure returned, heavy as ever. Since Evelyn's passing, Ethan had poured himself into the foundation, determined to live up to what she had seen in him. But every day brought new obstacles, doubts from others, doubts from within. One of the biggest challenges came from the foundation's board of directors. Evelyn had given Ethan full control, a bold move that didn't sit well with several board members. They questioned his background, his experience, and whether Evelyn's decision had been based more on sentiment than sense. And while Ethan understood their concerns, he also knew this fight wasn't just about proving himself. It was about proving that change, real, lasting change, could come from someone who hadn't come from money, from someone who had walked the same tough roads the foundation aimed to fix. He wasn't Evelyn, but he was ready to lead. And he was ready to fight for her legacy like it was his own, because now it was. At an urgent meeting called to address the future of the foundation, Ethan found himself standing before a room full of skeptical faces and silent judgment. One of the senior board members, Richard Hayes, a gray-haired man with a reputation for being blunt, spoke up first. "Mr. Miller," he began, voice calm but firm, "we all held Evelyn in the highest regard, but her decision to name you as her successor has left many of us uneasy. You're young, and frankly, you lack the experience. What makes you think you're capable of leading something of this scale?" Ethan took a steady breath, gripping the edge of the table. He'd expected this, but it didn't make it easier to hear. "You're right," he said, voice clear and unwavering. "I don't have decades of experience, and I'm not pretending I do. But what I do have is a deep commitment to continuing Evelyn's mission and a personal understanding of the struggles this foundation was built to address. Evelyn believed in me, and I intend to earn that trust every single day." Another board member, Linda Grayson, leaned forward, her expression sharp. "And how exactly do you plan to do that, Mr. Miller?" she asked. "Passion is one thing, results are another." Ethan nodded, meeting her eyes. "I've been studying Evelyn's plans and the work already in motion. My immediate focus is expanding outreach in underserved communities and making sure our programs actually move the needle. I won't claim to know it all, but I will outwork anyone in this room to make sure we get it right." The room fell into a heavy silence. Finally, Linda gave a small nod. "We'll hold you to that." Despite the initial pushback, Ethan began to find his rhythm. He started with smaller, manageable goals that built confidence and momentum. He made it a point to show up, to visit shelters, schools, and community centers funded by the foundation. He listened, asked questions, and stayed present. One of the most moving experiences came during a visit to a struggling school in a predominantly black neighborhood. The foundation had recently funded new textbooks, computers, and after-school programs, and Ethan wanted to see the impact with his own eyes. As he walked the halls, the energy was undeniable. Students and teachers alike lit up as they talked about how the support had transformed their classrooms. In one classroom, a young girl approached him, clutching a worn notebook. "Are you the man who helped our school?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Ethan knelt, so he was at her level, and smiled. "I'm part of the team that helped," he said, "but the real heroes are your teachers and your principal. They're the ones making it all happen every day." The girl's face lit up. I want to be a lawyer someday. My mom says that's what you are. Ethan felt emotion catch in his throat. You can be anything you want, he said gently. Just keep believing in yourself, and don't let anyone tell you different. As he left the school that day, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The weight of the work hadn't lessened, but the purpose behind it felt even clearer. Not every moment was inspiring, though. Resistance came often, from within the foundation and from the outside. Some staff members still questioned whether he was ready. Certain donors were hesitant, skeptical about the foundation's future under such young leadership. And sometimes, the pushback was layered with subtle racism, comments that seemed polite on the surface but carried sharp undertones. At a high-profile fundraiser, a wealthy donor cornered him, glass of champagne in hand. "You've taken on quite the challenge, young man," the donor said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's admirable, but don't you think this role might be a little too ambitious for someone with your background?" Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He forced a calm smile. "Ambition is what moves the world forward," he said evenly. "Evelyn believed that anyone, no matter where they come from, can make a difference. That's a belief I stand by." The donor raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Well, good luck with that." It stung, but Ethan didn't let it show. Encounters like that only strengthened his resolve. He wasn't doing this to impress people like that. He was doing it for the communities the foundation served, people who needed more than charity. They needed change. Most nights, Ethan found himself back in Evelyn's study, surrounded by her notes, her plans, and her presence. He read her journal entries like scripture. In one, she had written, "Change is never easy, and those who fight for it are often met with resistance. But the only way forward is to persist, even when it feels impossible." Ethan carried those words with him. When doubt crept in, when resistance wore him down, he repeated them in his mind like armor. He knew this road wasn't meant to be easy, but he also knew that real impact rarely came without a fight, and he was ready for it. He no longer saw himself as an outsider pretending to belong. Ethan was finally stepping into his role, not as Evelyn's replacement, but as someone carrying her vision forward in his own way. Slowly but surely, he was building a path that honored everything she stood for, while also making space for his own voice. By the end of that first month, the changes were starting to show. Projects were moving forward, and people within the foundation who had once doubted him were beginning to come around. At one staff meeting, Linda Grayson, usually reserved and skeptical, approached him with a rare smile. "You've impressed me, Ethan," she said. "I honestly didn't expect it, but you've proved me wrong." Ethan returned the smile, knowing how much that acknowledgement meant. "Thanks, Linda. That really means a lot." Later that evening, Ethan stood on the balcony of the estate, watching the lights of the city shimmer in the distance. The future was still uncertain, and there were plenty of battles ahead, but he no longer felt like he was fumbling in the dark. The impact of his efforts was becoming real, not just in reports or numbers, but in the faces and stories of the people whose lives were changing. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged, not just to Evelyn's legacy, but to the purpose she'd entrusted him with. And as the night settled in, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. No matter how tough things got, he wasn't going to quit. The main hall of the community center buzzed with excitement as people filled the room. Ethan stood quietly off to the side, watching the energy build. Today was the grand opening of a new vocational training wing, funded by Evelyn Walker's foundation. But it wasn't just another ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was a powerful symbol of what could happen when people came together with a shared purpose. Ethan adjusted his tie and tried to steady his heartbeat. Public speaking wasn't something he loved, But today wasn't about comfort. It was about showing up. In the audience were students, parents, staff, donors, and members of the press. Some had been with the foundation for years, while others were just getting to know it. But every one of them carried a look of expectation, of hope. At the podium, Linda Grayson wrapped up her introduction. And now, I'd like to invite the man who's continued Evelyn Walker's extraordinary work, our own Ethan Miller. Applause filled the room as Ethan walked up to the podium. He took a deep breath, placed his hands on either side, and began. "Thank you, Linda," he said, his voice clear and steady. "And thank you to everyone here today. This isn't just another grand opening. It's a celebration of what happens when people come together to create real, lasting change." He scanned the audience and saw familiar faces, students he'd met during site visits, parents he'd spoken with, and staff who had supported him from day one. When Evelyn handed me the reins of her foundation, I'll admit, I wasn't sure I could live up to her legacy. I was young, I didn't have the experience, I had doubts, lots of them. But Evelyn saw something in me that I couldn't yet see in myself. She believed that change doesn't come from comfort zones. It comes from persistence, from grit, and from believing in people. Ethan paused for a moment, the emotion rising in his chest. He pictured Evelyn's calm eyes, her steady voice, and all the lives she had impacted. This new training center is a reflection of that belief. It's a space where people can learn new skills, gain confidence, and build better futures for themselves and their families. It's a place that says, no matter your background, you deserve the chance to succeed. He looked out at the crowd, letting the words land. Evelyn used to say that legacy isn't about money or fame. It's about the lives we lift along the way. She left behind a legacy of hope, and it's our job now to keep that hope alive. The applause this time came stronger, louder. Ethan stepped back from the mic, his heart full. After the ceremony, he moved through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging smiles, listening to people's stories. One young man approached, his face serious but hopeful. "Mr. Miller, I just wanted to thank you," he said. "This center, it's going to change everything for me and my family. I've been out of work for a long time. Now I've got a real shot at something better." Ethan felt a wave of emotion hit him. He smiled, his voice warm. "I'm really glad to hear that. That's exactly why this place exists. Everyone deserves a second chance." As the crowd began to thin out, Ethan stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the city. He stood there quietly, thinking about everything it had taken to get to this moment. The doubt, the pressure, the setbacks. But also the victories, the stories, the people. He had a long way to go. But for the first time, Ethan felt grounded, not just in the mission, but in who he was becoming. It hadn't been an easy road, but every step had been worth it. That evening, back at the estate, Ethan found himself once again in Evelyn's study. Over time, the room had become a quiet refuge, a space where her presence still lingered. Her wisdom, her strength, the way she saw the world, it all lived here. On the desk sat a framed photo of her, eyes full of the same fire that had inspired Ethan from the very beginning. He reached for the journal she had left behind, flipping through the pages until he landed on one of her last entries. Her handwriting, familiar and elegant, seemed to speak straight to him. "Ethan, the world isn't always kind, but it holds beauty, resilience, and the power to change. Carry this work forward, not because you have to, but because you care. Do it out of love, for the people we serve and the future we can build together." He closed the journal gently, letting her words sink in. They weren't just instructions, they were a reminder of what really mattered. Evelyn's legacy wasn't about buildings or programs or titles. It was about people. It was about hope. It was about choosing to believe that even the smallest effort could start a ripple that reached further than you'd ever imagine. Ethan leaned back in her chair, his thoughts drifting to what lay ahead. There would be more obstacles, more late nights, and moments of doubt. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what was coming. He knew now that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up, caring deeply, and refusing to give up when things got hard. As night settled over the estate, the house fell quiet, wrapped in a calm stillness. Sitting there in the heart of Evelyn's legacy, Ethan made a quiet promise to himself to keep fighting for the people who needed it most, to keep believing, to keep building. Her faith in him had changed everything, and now it was his turn to pass that same faith on to someone else. Evelyn Walker's mission wasn't finished, and Ethan Miller was ready to carry it forward. Through her memory and his determination, they would continue to build something that mattered, a future rooted in justice, opportunity, and hope for everyone. Thanks for staying with us till the end. If this story moved you, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And take a look at our other stories. You never know what new perspective they might bring. See you in the next one.